Ready to commence our last panel discussion, and it is my pleasure to invite the panelists on stage now. For Arts Management and Education, Nurturing Creative Practitioners for the Future. May I now call upon stage Head of Theatre and Film NCPA, Mr. Bruce Guthrie, Educator, Visual Artist and Co-founder, PLORK School of Thought, Nitesh Mohanty, performer, composer, researcher, and author, Dr. Aneesh Pradhan, Managing Director, Mukta Arts, and Head of Academics, Whistling Woods International, Rahul Puri, Artist, Founder, and Director, Intarsia, Inlay Private Limited, Mr. Eric Sakellaropoulos. I hope I got that right, Eric. Co-founder, Artlinks Learning, and member of FICCI Arts and Culture Committee, Sadhana Rahul.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this concluding panel. Foremost, I think all of you all will join me in giving a big round of cheer to the wonderful team at AVID. Madhu, Asad, Dhvani, Aisha, Zanabia, Sagar, Shantanu. I hope I've got all the names right. If I've missed anybody, omission is mine, but the intent to thank you all is immense. Just to set context for this panel, the subject of education and arts management is Himalayan in range. So I'm just going to build a contextual framework to see how the conversation will flow. Now, India, like the most parts of the earth, is a repository of living arts. Collectively, in our reservoirs, millennia of traditions and expressions jostle for space. Each generation sort of stamps their artistic motives. And what happens is we are enriched with this wonderful legacy of a rich tableau of human artistic endeavors. Arts exemplifies this continuum in mankind, and the plinth of the arts is education, knowledge, dissemination of knowledge. Our panelists today have all a very deep, abiding, binding, and a compelling relationship with both arts and education. So we gathered here together to sort of dialogue and discuss and debate how to harness this power of education, how to sort of share the best management practices when mankind changed the word knowledge to education.
Thank you, sir.
So it's fitting if I ask Aneesh to strike the opening swar or the opening notes. You are a practitioner, a musician in one of the ancient traditions that we have. So being an author, educator, musician, composer in the Hindustani classical tradition, give us a sense of the sonic landscape of this tradition, the watershed moments, the watermark moments, the defining moments from the time that you took your talim, riyaz. Talim is education, riyaz is practice, allegiance to gharana or the school of music, to the contemporary idiom. How has the learning management systems in education, in classical music, how have they evolved over centuries?
How many minutes do I have?
4 minutes. Elevator pitch, 4 minutes.
All right. Well, the great masters in the past did 78 RPM records, under 3 minutes. So I'll try to
Gohar Jan also.
So, I started at the age of 6, and it's been a little over 5 decades that I have been doing Hindustani music. And of course, along with that, I have been collaborating in intercultural collaborations as well. I started my studentship in the institutionalized format of teaching. But very soon I was accepted as a disciple by my guru, Pandit Nikhil Ghosh, and I studied with him till he passed away. So I have had the benefit of learning in both these transmission methods. And I've seen pedagogy at work at very close quarters, and that's what has impacted me as a teacher as well. So over the last several decades, I've been teaching both in a one-to-one kind of, Sina Basina Talim, individually, customized training to each student. But alongside that, I've been associated with various institutions, universities, colleges, not just in India, but overseas as well. So I've seen how syllabi and coursework have been designed. At times, I've been part of the designing element as well. So it's been a huge learning curve for me as well. Of course, institutionalized training started primarily in the last quarter of the 19th century. And over the first half of the 20th century, there were several changes that took place. But since the 1990s, we have seen a rapidity in change thanks to technology. And so now a lot of the teaching takes place also online. That has its own challenges, because essentially this is an oral tradition that we are talking about. Hi.
Welcome, Rahul.
Hi. So, with regard to an oral tradition, it's also very important to observe things, not necessarily articulate each and every step. Okay? So observation, learning through osmosis, all this is very much part of that tradition. So a lot of that we kind of have lost. In the Guru Shishya training method, there was a sense of entitlement which continues to this day among the gurus, that is the people who are teaching, the mentors. But today we find that there is a sense of entitlement also with the students, where everybody feels that with the click of a button, you have access to this humongous amount of information. But how to convert that information into knowledge, and how to turn that knowledge to wisdom that we have imbibed through successive generations, is what the guru essentially was supposed to do. Okay? Whether all gurus do that, that's a different story. But that is why the guru played a very pivotal role in traditions like these. While we're talking about Hindustani music, I must really highlight here that we're talking only of a minuscule portion of music making in India.
True.
Concomitantly, there have been multiple streams of music making through centuries. And today we have even more newly developing streams. So when we are looking at the music scape of the Indian subcontinent, and particularly in India, we need to factor in all these. When we are talking about arts management, when we are talking about education, we need to factor in that we are talking not just about a particular area of music, when I'm talking about music, of course, but all these streams. There's a huge spectrum. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is that, first of all, arts practitioners, and in my case, music practitioners, are never represented on bodies like these. Okay? So it's all very well to have us as leisure activity, you know. So between the panel discussions, but that is the reality, actually. You know, people think that musicians are like lamb lambs just, over centuries, and they can be patronized and stuff like that. But actually, the fact is that musicians are ingenious, they are resilient, and they're street smart, So, and we construct our own adaptive strategies. We've done that. We have negotiated through huge changes in technology. I mean, people weren't, they were playing for 2 hours, 3 hours in a single evening. Then they immediately took a leap and did 3-minute recordings. How did they do that? There was an element of tailoring of repertoire, of emotive content, everything, They played with theater, they played with cinema, everything possible. They changed pedagogy. So there have been huge changes, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and I must thank the organizers for that. But there are many like me who would want to have a voice.
So I think what he said is true, because the rag and what the musicians do is, the gift that Indian music has given to the world, the melodic framework. And just to add to what Aneesh said, I think we as audiences also need to salute musicians like you. While you all doff your hat to the past, you all have a wonderful, sensitive eye to the future and to contemporary times. So I think a round of applause to his percussive beats. I don't think we can match your percussive beats, but...
Thank you.
So if I just pivot from an individual point of view, Bruce, to you, where we bring in the individual and an institutional attitude, it's the NCPA, the National Center for Performing Arts, since its inception in 1969. For over the decades, its guiding principle has been preservation, promotion of classical arts and contemporary arts with dissemination of knowledge. As an institution, which is not primarily only for education, what is the component that you all have sort of built and woven into the institutional framework, and as your role heading films and theatre, just give us a sketch on how do you view education?
Thank you very much, everybody, for having me and for inviting me to come and speak today. Education's a silver bullet. Kind of like no matter where you're from, it is the key to social mobility. And engaging with arts and culture not only frees up creative thinking across a multitude of different areas of business and various different things kind of like in the world, whether it be problem solving, whether it be creating a new product, whatever that might be, whether it be being a doctor, being a lawyer, is that I've been lucky enough in my career to work both in professional theatre in places like the West End and in New York, but also to work in education sectors and to work with some of the top drama schools in the world as well. And being able to witness firsthand and experience firsthand just how rewarding that can be, not only for the people who are participating in it, but the people who are creating the environment that allows these people to thrive. Because that's the critical thing, is that, in creation, is that, or in producing or in directing, is that you can either be a gardener, who's somebody who allows things to grow organically, or you could be an architect who constructs things. And I think that as an arts manager that you've got to be something of a landscape gardener, because you need to, thank you, because you need to create environments which allow pockets of things to thrive. You might not always be the expert in those things, you might not always be the person who is best equipped to do that, but if you can understand the needs of the artist or of the student or of the school or of whoever it is, then you can create that environment which allows them to thrive. And I think that that's what all learning is, understanding how people's brains work and then finding a way in order to be able to maximize their potential, period. It's the same in directing, it's the same with actors and working with actors. And at the NCPA, is that there is that great tradition there. So our founder looked at the ocean and built an arts centre. How much more aspirational do you want? We've got the 5 spaces that we're looking to not only be curating shows there, we want to create the top of the mountain, really. So when people come and they experience our shows, they do what I did when I was 9 years old and said, I want to do that. I don't know what I want to do about it, but I want to do that. And if you can do that, then it opens up all sorts of possibilities. I mean, I have people on my advisory committee who are very successful in business and who are so passionate about the arts because of experiences that they have had and because it's changed their lives for the better. And it's one thing to change the way that somebody thinks, but if you can make them feel, they'll remember it forever. And that's part of the reason why we're all in this room, right? Is because we've all had that experience of being in a room where somebody has created something and we experience it with them together in the moment, which speaks to everything that we are as people, as human beings. It is the essence of our nature. The digital stuff we'll come on to, because I think that the digital element of it is once again a silver bullet for social mobility. I think it gives access to people who otherwise would not get access to those things. It's not the same thing. It's not as good as the same thing, but it is better than not having anything, and it is getting better and better and better. And it's about creative thinking, and it's about problem solving, and it's about our ability to adapt and make things better, that the arts helps to inspire. Whether it be watching somebody perform, performing yourself, or just being around people who do that, is that the innovative thinkers aren't necessarily the people who go to business school and learn about accounts and economics, as important as that is, and it is important. But the ability to be able to look at a problem, or to be able to look at a situation, or to be able to look at an opportunity and be able to say, we can do something great here. That's what the arts does. And so the programs that we want to do at NCPA are about helping to support people who want to have careers in this, who already have careers in this and are struggling, but also is that to create opportunity for them to perform on our stages and at stages across the country. And it's been great to hear how open everybody's been in this room, and that we will work hard to take that forward and to act on a lot of the things that have been said today with Bangalore International Centre, with Prithvi, with Rangashankara, with Habitat Centre in Delhi. We're already talking. And it's not about everybody clamouring for their piece of the pie. I think we just need more pie. And I think that we can, as a group of people, we can make the case for that. And I think that there are a lot of people that want to listen. But education is a silver bullet, and making sure that, that everybody who wants to, and that's the critical thing, everybody who wants to has access to it and feel like there is the potential there to do anything is what we are all about.
So I think more pie is going to be the code word for all festival platforms, you know, and more pie means NCPAs in every city of India, right?
I hope so.
Okay. So segueing from individual institutional framework on the performing arts, let me bring you in, Eric. I think I won't repeat myself here because Jonathan alluded to the crafts and the role of crafts and the handmade in the previous panel. After all your global sojourns, you now reside in Mysore, immersed in a centuries-old tradition of Intarsia or marquetry, the inlay work with wood. Eric, just give us the storyline, the narrative. How is it that a centuries-old tradition got passed generation to generation when there was no formal school of education? And that's not to say that the work is not great. The work is magnificent. To your role that you've done in organizing the crafts together and creating this collective in a city like Mysore.
Well, right now the situation is changing. We have a young population that is no longer as enthusiastic about joining the craft and pursuing that. Yes, so we're faced with a dilemma of how to make this profession interesting to younger people and also how to transmit that. I myself learned by traveling to many places in the world and studying in many workshops. I'm also quite unique in that I spent my lifetime searching for raw materials. I go to the forest and search for my own raw materials. I'm an avid diver. I spend my time diving in the sea looking for unknown things as well, which I use in my work. So now we're faced with what can we do to formalize this in terms of education? And we're taking now a couple of approaches that we've looked at. We're receiving some of the Compagnons members from France. Now the Compagnons are an 800-year-old guild in France, which specializes in training and teaching and preserving all of the different art forms and crafts in the country. We started receiving some people last year, and we'll be doing this now on a continuous basis. The Compagnons Tour de France are people who spend 7 years touring France. Now that's extended to a global level. We're going to be putting Mysore basically permanently on the map of India now, for receiving batches of students one after another. Now the Compagnons assures the people who graduate or are accepted by that society a title, and that title ensures them a very decent income in their livelihood. The people who are restoring Notre Dame Cathedral at the moment are all members of the Compagnons. The Compagnons was also organized in a very interesting fashion. It was against regionalism. One of the reasons why they tour France and spend many years living in different parts of the country is it's a cultural experience, and it's to break down that sense of regionalism as well. What they achieve by doing that is by getting a much greater diversity of talent pool. So to build the cathedrals in Europe, for example, they needed people who came from various regions and people who had various skills. So now this has extended itself to a worldwide basis. They have over 50 locations on the planet now where they're sending people. The reason why we're taking them into Mysore is, first of all, I'm one of the few people left who does my profession, my work on the scale that I work on and the diversity. When I meet people from the Compagnons, they look at me and they say, we had no idea there was anybody left like you living on the planet and still working that way. So one of the reasons we're taking them is not only to educate these people in France who are already getting a very good education, but it's to see if we can turn that around and then take Indian students and send them to France. So the subject that I'm broaching is about cultural exchange. And we want Indian students to be able to go and work not only in France, but in many other countries. And we're looking at doing cultural exchange programs with other nations as well, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, which I've been to several times even recently. We're organizing programs based on that as well. Cultural exchange is very important not only for the preservation of arts and for crafts, but for basically many panelists commented on this already, but for a more profound understanding of one another. So that much we're organizing. And the other thing that we're doing is we're starting to teach in universities. We're teaching universal faculties. When I say we, I have another companion who is a fellow woodworker. He's a menuisier who is a member of the Compagnons. I'm not. I learned by traveling all over the world myself. I did my own routine. But we're both now teaching at an architectural faculty and trying to introduce the subject of crafts to university students. And that brings me to the subject, which is what's most important, is to get away from the distinction between what we have between the fine arts and the crafts. It's a bad British hangover.
I'm glad you brought that point up.
In France, they always had many different levels of education for the crafts and for the arts. Indonesia is a very good example. In Yogyakarta, there's a university where people graduate in batik making, in glasswork, in metalwork, in ceramic, and leather, and they graduate with even a PhD in that subject. So to encourage today's youth in India, to tell them that you can get a PhD in a subject or a master's degree, where you can be on a level. When I first arrived in Bombay, back in 1997, I had a girlfriend at the time who used to take me to these very swank parties all over Malabar Hill and PNC Road, Marine Drive. And she would ask me, can you please stop introducing yourself as a carpenter? And I used to tell her, but the look on people's faces.
Master artist.
I'm having such a good time. Now, the word doesn't translate properly in English. In French, we're what's called an ébéniste, someone who works with ebony, precious materials, rare woods. It's a tradition that goes all the way back to the old kingdom of ancient Egypt. Yeah? And it's a profession which is considered to be an academic and intellectual profession as well. So, again, we have to change people's attitudes. We might have to change the vocabulary as well, because the vocabulary is limited in English.
More on that in the next segment, yes. So you've been the nomadic student, but I'd like to, in the next segment, I'd love you to talk about your work with the guilds, and we'll take that up in the, I'll introduce the other panelists. Okay. We didn't have the privilege of putting slides, but actually I would advise you all just to go and see the kind of work. It's spectacular. So, well, we've done performing arts, crafts. So let me turn to films. We did allude to Bollywood in the morning, in the panel. Rahul, you know, it was the film industry, the allure for the masses and the classes. Whistling Woods International comes forward, a decade old, and you know, there are, you teach films, creative arts, communication, curriculum-based structured, methodology of teaching, a kind of play between practical and theory. What was the focus for setting this institute? Was it to democratize the arts? And what's the body of the alumni been like? You must have seen several batches that have come out. What's the alumni strength? How do they view back? Have they stayed the course or used this education to go into an allied field?
First of all, let me apologize for being late. I was struck down by VIP movement, so unfortunately that took the extra time. So Whistling Woods, we're now 17, 18 years old. So I think we started in 2006. And the idea was very much that Bombay, or Mumbai being the center of the film industry in India, didn't have a film school. It had no place to teach filmmaking. And everybody who had been to film school and made it into the Mumbai film industry had come from FTI, which was obviously in Pune, and then subsequently the government started SRFTI in Calcutta. But both of those schools were running a curriculum that was quite out of date in terms of how they went about it, and they were very small. I mean, the cohorts were 35, 40. If you wanted to be a director or something like that, probably even smaller in screenwriting. And so what was happening was you were beginning to see, and you have seen, I mean, you know, FTI has put out a heck of a lot of very successful alumni who have made it into all of the technical facets, so cinematography, editing, sound design, and been greatly successful. But it wasn't finding the same success, perhaps, with direction, producing, acting. And those alumni who, strangely, have been successful in those fields from FTII all came from other specializations. So, you know, Raju Hirani is an editor, David Dhawan's an editor, and Subhashji, obviously, who started Whistling Woods, is an actor. He's graduated as an actor from FTII. So the idea very much was, can we create a school in Bombay that would allow young people with an aspiration to get into the industry a more formal training process that would take them through it. And when we started, I would say, very much as a vocational school. We started with a 2-year diploma, very similar to what FTI offered. And the idea very much was to get young people industry ready, you know, and have them ready to go when they graduated. I think subsequently what we decided was that that was all well and good. But because people coming to us at 18, 19, 20, 22 had so little grounding
in filmmaking.
Arts, not just in filmmaking, but in the arts in general. I mean, you know, if you look at Indian schools up to 12th grade, there is so little literature, there is so little music, there is so little exposure to the arts, that what was happening was we were getting a lot of students whose only understanding of filmmaking was defined by Bollywood in a way, right? And so how do you break free of that, right? So then the idea was then, all right, well, let's go from a 2-year diploma to a 3-year degree and bring in a lot more contextual learning about the arts for our students. Go back in that first year of foundation and really give students inputs into film history, into music, into drama, into theatre, into all of the different Indian styles of theatre, so that when they come and they're about to tell their stories, they don't feel the need to sort of conform to something. See, at the end of the day, any institution of higher education isn't there to get students to conform to a certain way. This is the time where students should have the freedom to express themselves, right? Express themselves in whichever way that they want to. But for them to be able to do that, they first have to discover a little bit about themselves, right? And that, I think, has always been the challenge for us, because students come with so little grounding. They come with so little ability to really express themselves. But it takes that time. It takes a little bit of time for them to find themselves. There is a film school sort of hangover that everybody has, where suddenly they arrive at film school, and you know, we've seen the opposite, right? Where they arrive in film school and suddenly they see Godard and, you know, Kurosawa, and all of a sudden start thinking they're going to make films like that. But actually, in their hearts, they want to make films like David Thomas. You know what I mean? I mean, so all of that is there in terms of a sense of conformity. And so what we've really tried as much as possible to throw off a load of those shackles for students and really give them an opportunity to break free and really, you know, I tell students, I'm like, please make as many mistakes as you want. Just don't make the same mistake again and again. That's not good. But other than that, this is the time for you to take chances, take risks. Because once you get out into the industry, then everybody's going to turn around and say, okay, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. You know, iska paisa lagta hai, and all of that kind of
Suit
stuff.
the curriculum to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the idea here is for students to really, really immerse themselves as much as possible in their own expression, find their own voice. And that led us then to branching out into journalism, advertising, music, you know, visual design, fashion, all with a similar idea in terms of helping students find their voice. And now, you know, there are 3,500 alumni out there from Whistling Woods, which is,
Oh, wow.
you know, completely changed the industry in terms of when you watch a Hindi film or an OTT show these days. It's impossible to do it without finding a Whistling Woods alumni somewhere in those credits.
What a marvelous testimony.
Yeah, and you know, your question of, you know, how many students have stayed around, the answer is that of the students that have graduated, I'd say 95, 96% are still here in the film industry. They've not left. And
Yes.
I think that's testament to the kind of teaching that our faculty has put in. But it's also testament, I think, to how much people really want to make it, you know, and how much commitment they have to their education. I think, you know, what we've tried to do is the idea is to try and make education in film or education in the creative arts an option for parents, you know. When we first started, we used to have parents who would, you know, students would fight their parents. You know what, no, I want to do this, I want to come to Whistling Woods, or I want to study film, or I want to study acting. And now, 17 years later, the wonderful thing is we have parents who are literally dragging their kids and saying, you know what, I think my child should study this. I think my child should study this. And I think that is a progression that has happened in the country, certainly since we started in 2006, where suddenly parents have become a lot more aware of the opportunities that exist for students. And yeah, you know, as Bruce says, the next challenge is to really try and increase that access. Not everybody can come to Bombay. Not everybody can afford the education because film education it's not cheap.
Hold the thought. We'll visit that.
Yeah.
Hold
So
the thought.
the idea is then to sort of expand that out. And we'll see what we can do.
So Nitesh, you've come in last but not the least because there was a reason for this position. You are the sum total of what we've all said right now. Yeah. So being a visual artist, at that fluid intersections between culture, communication, media, arts. Your work in the last decade or so, particularly in terms of education, has been in the interconnectedness of the arts, which I think, having been in the education sector, education in India is extremely prescriptive, it's didactic, it's instructional. So there has been a body of work that you've did. So share the broad brushstrokes of how this interconnectedness with the arts and this large canvas came through.
Thank you. It's acknowledgement.
We are being watched.
Someone is acknowledging our presence. Yes. Thank you, Sadhana, and thank you, everyone. This has been a privilege to be in this panel. And before I respond to your question, I have something in common with all my panelists, and that's not Asad's curation, but it's just Bombay, perhaps. So I studied fine arts in JJ, and I've heard Aneesh perform there. And then my schooling happened in a fine arts school, but my learning happened in NCPA when we went and watched these world cinema, which was being curated, watched the photography exhibits in Piramal in NCPA. And I've been invited to Whistling Woods to teach color psychology next month. With Eric, we shared a cigarette and a conversation some time back, so there is a common link here as well. But
So the Sutradhara,
yes,
connector.
yes. So I guess that's serendipity. But coming back to your question, Sadhana, I think when you're studying fine art, you are taught fine art. I was privileged to move from fine art to NID Ahmedabad when we were taught design. And then I was privileged enough to then chair a creative program in a management school called MICA, where they teach media and advertising. And I kept wondering, why are these three institutes not talking to each other? Because when you're telling stories, you don't tell stories devoid of a certain art. You bring all the arts together. So I think the bane of education is when we start looking at one thing as one thing. And we've not learned from the cubists to bring multiple perspectives when you're looking at one thing and say, hey, but there's music there. Hey, but there is craft there. Hey, but there's a way of putting craft and music together, and which perhaps comes through dialogues and acting, which is cinema. So I don't know, with over the period of years, I've learned to redefine education in my own head and for my students and the classrooms that I've been privileged enough to go from FTI to Shrishti to NID to MICA and Tata Institute of Social Science to liberate education from the meaning of education, from the definition of education, which is extremely didactic, which is extremely archaic. I'm glad forums like this are encouraging us to redefine what education means, because it can be very prescriptive. It is still very prescriptive in 2023. We are not brave enough or disruptive enough to challenge curriculums. In fact, when I was chairing the creative program in MICA, we broke the curriculum and redesigned it every year because the world has moved. There are new technologies, there are new interventions which challenge educators to keep pace with the students. We are talking to digital natives, and they're not going to listen to some age-old theory which you think is still relevant. So relevancy becomes the cornerstone of education. And I think this ability to constantly align yourself with the times without saying that I have my monolith and this is going to speak on behalf of all the fraternity is something that we all need to do, irrespective of we are educators or not, in hospitality, in fashion, in any form of industry. We need to redefine the meanings and associations and attributes that have been attached to it. And I think that's not just a necessity, it is imperative, it is pivotal, and if you don't do it, you've already missed the bus. And I think I think it's just a privilege of having moved from one institute to another, which has brought this insight, which we've been able to distill into the idea called PLORK, which my partner Sonal and I have just initiated, just to make more people who don't think they are creative, make them feel more empowered to choose what they want to speak.
So, I think the fault line is with all stakeholders who sort of miss the thin line demarcating what is pedagogy and what is curriculum. Pedagogy has longevity, has practice, but curriculum can be evolving based on the pedagogy. So, before I segue to the next segment, I did want to sort of sum up. One of the cities in India, which is Chennai, actually has done something in the right direction. There's a very rigid education system, but down every road there is a music school. It's become one of the UNESCO's special cities on music, and Banaras. What the ecosystem has done, they have what Sanjoy refers to as commander-in-chiefs, but actually these are music sabhas. They vie with people to get the artists. And the joy of discovery is very high. So they look for newer artists. So today in the Carnatic music system, almost every December when the season starts, you have 10 new singers coming out. It could be instrumental music, it could be vocalists. And from December 1st to January 31st, that one city hosts about 4,000 concerts, 70% are free. So that's where I think education, geography, ecosystem all sort of comes together, and it's worth for the policymakers, for when we write the report, for people to think this through. Okay, so let's segue to our second segment, which is really where art management, where art sort of meets the mart. It's a debate that we normally shove under the carpet, but I think it's important. So Eric, you mentioned that as early as the 6th century, there were guilds which organized for craftsmen. There was a very good, very robust trade that was happening. What does it take today when the European Union has come forward to say the future is the handmade? It is about sustainability. So why are we in this position where we feel that the crafts are dying? What does it take for us to see that a beautiful craft where you've spent a lifetime, how does the next generation live to see it?
That's going to take a lot of initiative and hard work, but it's mainly through education. Whether it be setting up small micro schools within grass communities, which free up some of the younger people to be able to also partake in their father's workshops and get an academic education at the same time. Whether it's trying to bring architecture students and immerse them to a greater understanding of the crafts, or whether it's trying to set up guilds which are similar to what they have in France. As you mentioned, it was in the subcontinent which had some of the earliest craft guilds in history. During the 6th century, many mentions in the Upanishads, I believe, as well, about crafts guilds. Today we have none. And the guilds were primarily to protect the craftsmanship from their patrons, to make sure that they weren't being overexploited. So I don't think the reality has changed that much today. And I think that there is a necessity to take a look at how we might be able to organize guilds as well in India. And guilds that would not only give people a title, but assure them of a decent level of earning as well, but guilds that would establish a transmission of the knowledge of those particular crafts. And a lot of our crafts are broken up here on a regional basis in India. And I believe there's a different type of educational approach that can work for each individual community as well. But we do have to change the sort of like mentality, not only of the young, but also of our patrons. There's a common thought that if it's made in India, it's got to be cheap. We get some of my own clients who will travel to Europe and spend a fortune on what are basically watered down reproductions. And then they'll look at our work that we do here, which is authentic work, which is a tradition that's going back centuries in time, which has been undiluted, unadulterated. And they'll say, well, how would you be charging this for? It should be much, much less. So that's another thing that we have to take a look at, is how do we put these crafts into a kind of market value which will sustain those education systems? How do we change not only the mentality here, but then how do we get involved in cultural exchange programs and in exhibitions internationally as well, which can show what the craft communities in India are capable of doing. This is undoubtedly probably the greatest bastion of craftsmanship left on the planet subcontinent. I went recently to Indonesia, where there were generations of people who worked with mother of pearl and shell, and they've shut down all of their workshops. They can't afford the labor anymore, they can't find the demand, and I think the biggest problem was that their products became not as interesting as they had been, and they didn't have the design initiative left. So it's a manifold approach that we have to take. We have to come up with people who are highly skilled in terms of design. We have to make sure that people who are in a position to design today's buildings, houses, homes, furniture, have an understanding of the craft. We have to make sure that people who are working in the craft have a higher education on a level where they can work with those people closely as well and come up with new and interesting ideas that work for today's markets. And I think it's very important to make sure that we get the government involved in sustaining cultural exchange programs. As I was mentioning before, the guild that is in France is largely about a cultural exchange program. It's about learning other languages, it's about learning different styles, it's about having a different human interaction as well, too, which is very valuable in terms of how crafts can be sustained.
And has the geography of Mysore helped, given that the Maharaja, the Wadiyar family, was extremely generous with the arts? So has the geography of Mysore helped with this craft?
The geography in the sense of the climate is very good for woodworking. So we have a 10-degree relative humidity throughout wood seasons naturally. It's an area which has a tremendous tradition. As far
Tremendous
as
tradition, that's true.
But it goes back only to the time of Tipu. Before that, most of the inhabitants of Mysore were in Vijayanagar and Hampi. So it's a recent tradition. The Inlay craft which I practice was introduced by two people, a man who they call the Burmawala, who came from Burma, who introduced cutting solid ivory and inserting that into rosewood, and then afterwards by an Iranian family that was brought to build the palace as well, who came from Tehran. And so I'm the third person who's come along a century later, and they call me the next generation of Mysore craftsmanship. And it's not an easy region for most people to work. We have a lack of patrons. I, for example, never bothered spending any time in Bangalore. I took the train immediately to Bombay. I set my sights much higher. I looked at the top of Malabar Hill. I went to Delhi. In fact, I have the least amount of orders ever from any city in India have come from Bangalore itself. And most of our craftsmen are stuck and they don't make it past Bangalore. Yeah? And Bangalore is, because Mysore is very close to home, again, there's a look, well, it's close to home, it's made in India. What's it worth? So we really have to put the Indian crafts back into value in terms of the appreciation that we have from our own public here in India as well.
So I think Eric and Aneesh, you all have, your mighty shoulders have to carry on the tradition. Now, Aneesh, we live in a vastly altered world. It is the power of the hashtag, it is Insta intrigue. How does Hindustani classical music practitioners find their spaces in stage? what in your research and your authorship and your teaching, if you could give some takeaways, because it's not that we don't have concerts of Hindustani classical music. You're coming to Bangalore to teach school children. So there is interest. That's the plinth of hope, right? So do share with us.
So actually, we have to have a bit of a reality check here. So first of all, there is no real demographic study of this discipline, this ecosystem, okay? Who are the stakeholders? Have we mapped out each agency that is involved in the music making process? Whether it's the audience, whether it's the record labels, teachers, students, etc., government, private organizations, trusts like, NCPA, etc., And do they talk to each other? If they do, what are they talking about? And in all this situation, in this context, where does the musician lie? Okay? Does he or she really have a voice, is the question. Eric was talking about the state of the crafts. This has been the situation with Hindustani music and actually with traditional music forms across several decades now. I can tell you, this doesn't have to be an autobiographical thing, but just as an instance, for several years, this is just for you to get an idea of the amounts that we are talking about, okay? I used to receive as a tabla player, as an accompanist to vocal, instrumental, or Kathak dance. This is only Hindustani music, okay? I used to get how much? For a single evening of 3 hours. 300 rupees. He knows that he is an organizer. But that is the situation. All the music circles you talked about, this was the situation, and this continues to be the situation. This is the sad reality. We talk about, traditional music dying, etc., What do we tell our students, And what do we tell their parents? That they have career opportunities? I cannot give that guarantee. I can only teach music. But I cannot say that, okay, after you spend around 20 years learning this music, you'll be able to, live a decent life. Not a very luxurious kind of life. But that is the context in which we are talking about all this. We are not taught how to deal with the business of making music. Okay? We talked about reviewing pedagogy, we talked about reviewing curriculum. These things are not really happening both in the traditional format as well as at the university level. University level, sometimes every 5 years or so, they have to, perforce, do some sort of review. But the review really entails just a reshuffle of things and a little cosmetic change of bringing in, let's say, technology, sound technology, etc. But it doesn't really prepare the student of music to the real world that he or she is going to work in. So I really feel that arts management, etc., that we are talking about, it's completely removed from the reality that the Hindustani musician or any other musician involved in traditional music faces today.
I hear your voice on that, and it is a grim reality. But sometimes, as a researcher, there are the other side, which I don't have time to get into, but there is a flip side to that. There are other stories which tell you why it has still survived, and well, it survived. Well, you're still here, you're playing music, and we're hearing your percussive beats.
Yeah, that was my opening remark, that we evolve adaptive strategies.
Absolutely.
And we are resilient and we are street smart.
True.
Yeah?
Yes. So
because we have to live.
Yeah.
And this is a passion with us.
That's so
but
true.
that doesn't mean, I mean, until and unless society itself decides that the arts are vital to our very existence. Forget about institutions, etc. Just common people have to realize that. Okay? Only then will we be able to take a step forward. And until and unless all the stakeholders talk to each other, you know, for the longest time there haven't been, and Sanjay will agree with me about this, that most organizations do not have contracts in place. You know, in this very city, we tried, Shubha and I, tried to have a template of a contract for recording and for performance. There was stiff opposition from the established organizers because they said, no, we don't want all this. Why? Why don't you want to lay down terms, you know, in a transparent manner? Because you were bringing in areas of performers' rights, IPR, all kinds of IP. And this is something that they didn't want to talk about. Everybody talks about giving opportunities to young musicians. Oh, you'll have very good lights. You'll have a very good sound system. Okay? We'll give you publicity. What about the real stuff?
Yeah. Many milestones still to cross, many hurdles still to cross, but as platforms like this will continue to be there.
He's right, though.
Yes, absolutely. I cannot...
I can't eat lights.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I agree. The artist is the most important thing in the room. It's where it all comes from. It's why we're all there. Buildings are bricks and mortar, and I love where I work.
So to building on Aneesh's point, it's what society feels. So in the education sphere, it starts at school level. If you realize what Rahul said, by the time the child comes to 8th standard, all the optional subject of the arts are removed. And the time the school, the stakeholder, and the parent both look at that subject can go into teaching maths or the sciences. So it's a larger society. It's just outside the purview of this panel. It's a larger societal issue. But within this construct, let me ask you, Bruce, what does the NCPA have as a blueprint to sort of bring about a robust creative economy?
Okay, that's a massive question, but I can make a start on it. So just to speak to some of the stuff that we've heard as well, is that at the beginning of the pandemic, I'll try and keep this as succinct as possible, but if anybody wants to know more about it, then do come and find me. But at the beginning of the pandemic is that there was an online community was formed, just from, not only from groups of people here in Mumbai, but across the country as well, which was a theatre ADA, which was essentially, we were about 6 or 7 weeks into the pandemic. And the big question was one of actually suicide, because artists were in positions whereby their income just stopped and there was no end in sight. So what are they going to do? And actually is that as much as performing artists were trying to adapt and pivot and innovate in whatever ways they can. I've watched more Zoom plays in people's bedrooms than I would care to remember, but at least people were trying to do something and able to do stuff. Technicians, designers had nothing. We did a report which we commissioned with RX and the British Council supported, and Godrej have supported as well, which was called The Art of the Possible, where we interviewed designers, technicians, stage managers, people who work backstage and in the, you know, as creative teams from across the country, and the report screams disenfranchisement. It screams it. As much as there's, we don't have access to equipment, we don't have access to spaces, we don't have access to money, which is of course critical. no one values us, and that's what I'm hearing today as well, is that we don't value this. Education itself is a measurement of a standardized test, and usually a regurgitation of facts that are learnt by rote. And that's how we measure whether somebody's smart enough or not to get a grade. And then we use that grade through life in order to be able to measure and judge people. Are we measuring them correctly? Do we value this in the correct way? And that's a big question, and that's one that we as an institution have got to ask, and have been asking for the last 2.5, 3 years.
Within the institution?
Within the institution and the community as well. We've been talking to a lot of people. We've been talking to other organisations as well. You know, part of the reason I'm here today is a part of that conversation. We've just launched a website into beta testing, which is aotp.in, which is a free resource. It's a free resource, I should say, website for people to upload their details, whether you are a technician, a lighting designer, a set designer, a video designer, a stage manager, an aspiring manager and backstage of any kind, the head of a company, or that you're in charge of a venue. You can register on that website and put all your details in there, and it is a free resource. Standardized templates for contracts will be on there. Standardized templates for show reports will be on there, for scheduling. There will be masterclasses as well, given by not just professionals from this country, but from all over the world, because we were talking earlier about the need to take work out of this country. And there is opportunity there to do it, but we want to do it with people who work and live and practice here. So they can go to Hong Kong International Centre or the Edinburgh International Festival, or that they can go wherever it is in the world and take the fantastic culture of this country and the fantastic stories to other parts of the world. And the only way that you're going to do that is through evolution, not revolution. It's not going to happen overnight. But that I think, once again, is that with the group of people that there is in this room, there is an actual real chance of making something which is sustainable and practical and actually really helps people. That's the point, is that there are artists not just in Mumbai and not just in Delhi and then Kolkata and then Bangalore and Chennai and then Hyderabad, all screaming for opportunity, because that's what it is, right? And right at the beginning of my career is that there was a friend who helped me. He's a friend now, but he was a mentor of mine, and I was at drama school and I literally went cap in hand because I was painting his fence at the time. He was a producer, and I said to him, I'm directing a show, will you help me? Because he's produced shows in the West End and stuff, and he said yes, reluctantly came along to rehearsal. And then he never left rehearsal, and he was constantly giving me advice. And when we were at the Edinburgh Festival, and the show was a success, and we were sitting at 3 o'clock in the morning in my house with all the actors all sleeping in like everywhere in the house, and my parents feeding them and stuff like that, I was sitting with this person, and we had a chat, and I said to him, how, you know, this is amazing. How do I ever repay you for this? And he said, you don't. He said, that's the point of an opportunity, is that you never stop repaying it because you always make the most of it. So what we need to be in the business of is opportunity. That's it.
That's a wonderful answer. Rahul, Whistling Woods has got a huge expansion plan that you shared. So glass half full, half empty. What's the mojo for you all in terms of best management practices? How does the timestamp of the road ahead look?
Well, I think, you know, the idea is what we want to do is to try and really democratize as much as we can people getting education in the creative arts. Now, there are challenges to that. As I've mentioned, film education it's not cheap. So what we've done is we've introduced a load of scholarships into the school to try and help people from less privileged backgrounds get in. And the other thing that we've tried to do is we've tried to work with various governments up and down the country to try and introduce creative arts education into the schools. So we've worked with the CBSE, we've worked with the Delhi government. In fact, that project is going on right now, which is the SOSC project, where we're teaching 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students music, acting, drama, theatre, the media, so a general sort of overview of the media, and film. And what's really interesting about that is that it's not, it's not the elite schools of Delhi. It's government schools in Delhi, and you go across when they have their sort of open days and stuff like that, and there are parents who are from a very low middle class background, and they come and they have tears in their eyes because their 16-year-old or their 15-year-old, they never knew that they had this talent. They never knew that they could draw, that they could make a film, or that they could act in a play. Because it's not just that the subjects go from the curriculum. It's also parent mentality that, okay, now you've grown up to a certain age. Now stop all this dance, drama, finish all of this. Now you concentrate on becoming an accountant or an engineer or a doctor or whatever it is, right? So it's multiple sort of facets that the society sort of tries to almost choke the life out of young people who want to come forward into the arts. And the opportunity I think that we have at Wisdom Woods, and everybody should be looking at, is to how do you try to broaden that pipe? How do you try to, as much as possible, bring more opportunity, more access for younger and younger people to spend more and more time practicing the arts? There's no other way to do it, I'm afraid. There are a whole lot of regulation. Education in India is by far and away the most highly regulated industry that there is. I mean, really.
Though it's on the concurrent list.
Really, if you sneeze wrong in education in India, there's a regulation against it.
True.
So it is very, very difficult. When it comes to curriculum, you have to teach so many hours, and they have to be in class, and exams have to be conducted, and all of that. A lot of that does not suit the creative arts. So we are constantly bending and swaying to try and find ways around that where we can meet these criteria that governments have set up or universities have set up. We can meet those criteria, but at the same time give our students the opportunities that they need to have to be able to express themselves and pull the education, the true education that they need to have. And that is an ongoing process. Now, the new education policy that has come out, there's a whole lot of opportunity there in terms of how you can create a curriculum which is choice-based, in terms of students not having to dedicate themselves to one kind of thing.
And they've really addressed the age parameters.
So they've really done, and they've done a lot of things with, sort of staggered and a base of credit. So if you drop out a certain, you can come back.
Sure.
But there are still a whole lot of, I think, curricular issues that will make the teaching of the creative arts very, very difficult. Right? And so what our opportunity is, I think, is to just try to keep trying to broaden that pipe so that it becomes
sort of the bookends.
It becomes an opportunity for as many people as possible at all levels. As Bruce says, in-person education, I still feel is what is required, but there's no doubt that the internet and technology can provide a whole lot of access, which is better than nothing.
In interest of time, I'll let you do the closing remarks. So the voice one hears is this straddling of creativity and commerce. Nitesh, in your work, the work that you've done with corporates, the work that you've done with, say, what you just have to visit his prolific website. What is that kernel that helps you find that golden mean? There's a golden mean that you have to work towards, balancing creativity, commerce, sustainability, diversity, how have you sort of, is there a magic formula or it's something case to case that you worked?
So I'm just going to divert a bit before I come back to your question, quickly. So we are talking about arts, we are talking about creativity, we are talking about management, we are talking about commerce. And I hear all my panelists. There's a simple fundamental truth that if you understand something, you will appreciate it. If you appreciate something, you will value it. And if you value something, no one has to come and teach you how to manage it. With arts, and in this country, we have not followed this path. We don't have enough exposure to arts while students are at an age where they can be nurtured or inculcated a way of looking at art, understanding it, and then from understanding, they learn to appreciate it and then value it, and then perhaps they can be great managers. Then perhaps the pay scales or the disparities can be, attended to. But I think what we lack is fundamental understanding of arts. And I think we all will agree, because there's a small joke which I had heard one day when an art teacher is getting ready to go and teach in an art school, and the kid asks her, "Mom, what do you teach in school?" She said, "I teach my students how to draw in the college, fine arts." And she said, "When did they forget?" So I guess we all forgot how to draw at some point of time because we were nudged towards algebra or science or whatever we were talking about. I guess these are very fundamental problems that can be addressed. And Sir Ken Robinson has been doing, he passed away recently, but if you look at UK, today Tate as a gallery is opening itself to children to come and look at art before they can appreciate it and manage it and turn it into successful portfolios later on in life. I think there are initiatives like AVID, MAP, Baudajilat. We need to bring this very early on into our lives so our children or kids who are very perceptive can understand the value of this as they grow. You can't suddenly expect someone to be sitting at a CEO position and suddenly appreciate art. Where was the seed nurtured? And how did that bring that consciousness to appreciate it, to value it, and then pay the price that the artist should get? So I guess, before we look at solutions, I think we need to address the questions with more smart, intelligent probings. And we can make the change, and that's what we are trying to do with PLORK. We are democratizing the fact that you don't have to go into an elite school to learn art and design. You could be a homemaker, and you could be as creative as your kid who's in an NID, but perhaps there is much that you can bring into your role as a mom, and then understand what does that do to the ecosystem that you're managing. You're managing a home, and you're managing it creatively as a homemaker. But do we call our moms creative managers? We don't. We call them moms, housewives, homemakers, and so on.
It's a beautiful extension of the definition of art, I must say. So, well, that was 5 men on this panel, unplugged, unvarnished, gave the truth as it is without sugarcoating it, and a diverse range of voice that you all heard. So we'll open it to a round of Q&A from the audience and then probably come back for closing remarks.
I would like to echo Aneesh's. I mentioned very briefly in the morning about UNESCO's the 1980 recommendation that is precisely for this kind of, nature of artists. You are not, artists cannot be salaried, and then, but they are essential contribution to the society, and society needs. The society without art, we can't imagine. But because of this peculiar nature, so this recommendation, UNESCO recommendation, strongly encourages the countries, our member states means countries, to come out with a special legislation for artists. So this legislation can be the social well-being, because the artist, since you are not belonging to certain society, you don't have the pension or security, social, that kind of things, which all the other office worker benefit. So this recommendation is precisely about it. And so, for example, you mentioned about contract. So, for example, yes, this is not only in India, everywhere. Artists mostly work without contract. So, for example, the Korea, of course, that was because thanks to the UNESCO's recommendations, that Korea came out with a legislation governing the artist work. So, for example, Korea also lots of artists work without contract. Now it is legislation which obliges any works of art should be written contract, that kind of thing. So actually, for your information, 2 years ago, I wrote an article about this recommendation. Recommendation is very concrete and precise one. For the MARC, I met the MARC people this morning. I don't know whether still there. So yes, I think it was 2020, and the MARC has kindly put my article accessible for everybody, which is not the case of other article. So, and then you can Google also. And then, of course, I would be happy to interact with others also. And on this occasion, I also would like to share with you, UNESCO New Delhi, we are also publishing a legal handbook for performing artists, which will be launched towards the end of the year, which will advise lots of performing artists about your work. So, yeah, exactly, you're right. So that's true. I mean, we cannot talk about transmission or without ensuring livelihood. I mean, so I think this is obvious for everybody. And I know this patronage, this Indian traditional music, and not only traditional music, almost all of the art form survived thanks to the patronage. Sure. And of course, but in our modern society, the government in principle should take over. But in many countries, which is not the case, and India, of course, we have a strong patronage, like we are family, and we also had Suri. But of course, there should be more. And here, there is a great need for the government to step in. True. And I think you are the relevant stakeholders who should raise voices about it. Thank you.
Sonal? She's been a part of Nitesh's work. So would you like to say something?
So this was very interesting. I had a question actually for Rahul. Being a design student from Shrishti, and like you mentioned several times that these schools and colleges are not cheap. We are usually under immense amount of loans. So is Micah. And then becoming a designer or joining the creative industry is not easy, because now, again, thanks to AI, jobs are also not easy to find, and you're very, very easily replaceable. The next option you have is to become a teacher, which again doesn't pay. So my question to you is that being on this side and on that side, what is the future of any artist, designer, creative person look to you? Because you are also hiring teachers and you're also a creative person where students are learning. So it's a full circle for you. So if you could throw some light on that.
I think, you know, it is true that for us to sort of sit at an education level and almost guarantee success to students would be very detrimental, I think. I think, though, that what we can do, and the best thing that we do is, whether it's design or it's fashion or it's film or media or any of those things, the idea is to bring the industry. And I think that's one of the advantages that we have being in Bombay, is to bring the industry. I think only when you have a situation where you have one side on education and the industry comes regularly to see what's happening, does the industry get a sense of the value of what's going on, right? At the end of the day, as crude as it may sound, there is a transactional thing going on here, right? Where the industry is looking at the people coming out of educational institutes and trying to put a value on the kind of work that they do. And I think that the the opportunity is to try and bring as much industry as you possibly can to that place, show them the kind of value that is coming out of it, and then hope that they will then provide that value to students coming through. Now, yes, there is concern about AI and technology and all of those kinds of things. And I would like to say that one of the things that we try to do at Whistling Woods is not to shun it. I mean, we don't tell students, look, throw it away and, never look at it and, all of those kinds. But to bring it to students' notice, because let me tell you that most students know exactly how to use AI before we even get anywhere into it. I mean, they know fully well how to use it. But to explain to them perhaps the ethics behind it, to explain to them perhaps the relevancy behind it, and to explain to them how they can use it in their own processes without losing their own expression. And I think that is something that's particularly important given all that's going on around us. And it's not just happening in design, it's everywhere. I mean, look at America, they're on strike. So, but I think that challenge of bridging the gap between education and industry, the only way to do that is for an education institute to go out and build those bridges with industry and bring industry on board and give the industry an idea. And it takes time. Look, it took us years on the film side, where students would come, they would pay a heck of a lot to learn film, and they would go out in the industry, and the industry would say, okay, but how does it matter? You still start from here, right, at the end of the day. But what the industry soon learned was they may start from here, but 18 months later they'll be here, right? And that is where the value begins to come.
Can I say Can I say one thing about that? I'll just be very quick. Can I understand your situation a bit more? So you are a designer who wants to, I don't know, get more opportunity in designing, yeah?
Yeah, so Nitesh and I, we run PLORK School of Thought together. We are co-founders. Okay. So from a designer, I've become a teacher. Okay. And nothing has changed because we were in the conversation of making money, and I saw Nitesh dodge that question because he quite he quite doesn't like money. No, he likes money, but not talking about numbers. But we still face a challenge when we are pitching to clients, and we were talking to Kunal earlier that the first thing that any client has to say is that I don't have money. And it's sad to hear that over and over again. And just responding to what he was saying, the organizers are here and the artists are here. And what better forum than this to talk about money, because it matters.
Some questions we remain with. We don't necessarily find answers.
So I won't say about funding though, but I will say about opportunity once again, because I think that's when you talk about education, that's what it is. It is in no way a learning institution's obligation to ensure that someone is successful. It's a learning institution's obligation to provide them with a situation to thrive. That's period. And we see it more and more. Certainly in the UK at drama schools, I've just been working at one of the top ones. Directing a show, and that there is a kind of sense of, I have paid you money, so I am a client. I am not a student. No. You're a student. And we are providing you with an opportunity to thrive. And I think that for people who are working professionals or who are looking to develop that skill, I think that not only do you need to provide an opportunity for them, you need to pay them to train. And then take a vested interest in their well-being, and then try and find a way for that effect to then echo in different parts of the country. And that's what we want to do. It will take time, and it will take resource, and it will take everybody all pulling in the same direction. And once we get consensus on what that direction needs to be, then I think that that's something that has to be addressed.
Excellent panel and great moderation. Thank you very much. And I empathize with all of you because I'm an educator myself. And I'm going to speak from my observations. And I think one of the things that is plaguing what all we have been talking about is this very linear way of thinking about education. Yeah. This linear thinking of education is, and also a very linear way of comprehending reality. I would say a lot of our problem is because we are so removed from Indian reality. You know, I myself being somebody who taught 18 years before I really took the museum on, indigenous wisdoms are thrown out of the window. If I'm an institution which is to be talking about modern art, you know, an institute that trains modern art, then modern art must cancel traditional arts, okay? Modern art system of painting or sculpting must throw away craft, okay? And modern learning of music must throw away traditional music forms. I mean, the level of, in the way that we create these mainstream hierarchies is not just pathetic but dangerous, because we are actually going to be removed from our own reality in terms of where we came from as a race, what we have learned through our civilization, which is a 5,000-year-old civilization history that just cannot be taken and thrown out of the window. And I think each one of you have been talking about this in very different ways. And I think that's where the crux of the matter is. I always feel that curriculum becomes important because of this reason, that when you say that you want to teach modern art, please allow the option. These things can be coexisting. It doesn't mean that when you move forward, you have to cancel everything or erase everything which has happened before that. And I think that's where the problem is lying. Maybe tomorrow or in few years, we will hear classical Hindustani music concerts only abroad, not in India. And that would be the day to think what all we have killed ourselves. So I wanted to add this because this is exactly how do we really change our perception and our means and modes of thinking about our context, content, and our reality when we talk about education.
Thank you. We'll come back. Thank you. We take the question here and the gentleman behind, and then I think the panelists can answer it in terms of closing remarks.
I have a question for Eric, but with the permission of the moderator, may I back-end it with a short story?
Maybe we can take the story offline, ask the question.
So the story is with Bruce, NCPA, and it's as short as like 30 seconds. When I founded a craft center at NCPA 25 years ago with the patronage of Kamal Murarka Foundation of Crafts, where we had vibrant, active, thriving craft and design center in a place like NCPA in Mumbai, where we had workshops, designers, people like Gurupa Chetty, policy makers, just talking about craft. And Jerry Pinto at that point in time wrote an article where it called me the crafty lady, which my conservative traditional mother thought was derogatory, which I took it as a compliment because he said how crafty I was in convincing Mr. Tata and Mr. Bhabha to allow me to have a craft center at the National Center for Performing Arts, because it was a very expensive real estate to work with a Molela Potter. At the same time, we were working with a designer. So my question to Eric is, Eric, how important it is to make the educational and the knowledge side of the craft glamorous and cool and current. So just make it sexy. We want to say we are, keepers of cool, so you don't feel embarrassed saying you're a carpenter, as my son feels embarrassed when I say I'm a farmer. So should we make that education?
Well, the first panel, which was about tourism.
Eric, can we just take that one last question and then we answer all together? Just give that gentleman, he's been waiting.
One common theme that seems to be emerging is that there's not enough demand or pull, let's say, from people for the arts, let's say, especially arts education, right? And if I can speak for myself, so I don't come from a formal arts background, but even people in other walks of life, be it an engineer or scientist, would have benefited from some exposure to art. I got exposed to much later. Perhaps if we talk about it, bring those stories out, right, of how a successful engineer or entrepreneur has used the exposure to arts to be better at that, perhaps parents would ask for it. Why just focus on arts education for the artist or wannabe artists only, right?
Okay. No, that's a fascinating point.
So let Eric take crafts. Eric, would you like to respond to the crafts? And
yes, the question was, how do we make it more attractive to young people, and how do we elevate the status of craftsmanship? Well, the first panel, which was on tourism, what is the most visited place in India? the Taj, of course. What do people like about it? Not just the building, but the inlay work. So first of all, I mean, we have to understand that people travel from all over the world to see this. How do we elevate the status and how do we make people look at it differently? Is by creating guilds, awarding titles, bringing people into university programs, allowing people to get degrees in subjects. Again, our fine arts departments divided themselves between what we call painting, sculpture, fine arts, and then what was technical institute. And the crafts went into the technical institute. I remember even when I grew up in Canada as a youngster, they said when we were like 12 years old, who's going to university? Raise your hand, we'll send you to typing class. Everyone else, you're going to tech school, you don't need to know how to type. So this is a distinction which has been made between what we call academics and what we call sort of like crafts. And even the word craft, when I mention it, I have a hard time pronouncing that word sometimes because it's not just a craft, it's an art form as well. And it's an art form which takes an exceptional amount of devotion to learn. Perhaps the most devoted people in this country are the musicians, in my own opinion, because that is the art form which takes the greatest sincerity and the greatest amount of work. So we do have to make changes. We do have to, I think, look at what kind of programs we can organize to do that. And we do have to sort of like have exhibitions and international and cultural exchanges as well too, that allow people to see that. If you tell a youngster, you're not just going to study how to cut a piece of wood, this will bring you to Paris, it will bring you to New York, it will bring you to, Indonesia, you can share your life with people in other parts of the planet. I think there are many incentives that we can give and attach to them. And that there was a crafts element in the NCP, I take my hat off to you, it should still be there. Yeah.
Quick comments?
Yeah, I would like to respond to the gentleman's thought. I feel when you do a quick study of how many institutions are there in India, which like the IITs, IIMs, and the sciences, and how many art schools or design schools or creative schools are there. I guess we need to recognize the value of creative understanding and its implications, irrespective of you stay in the creative stream or go to the science or the mechanics or the commerces. I guess that's where we've missed something very pertinent. And if such forums can bring our governments, our institutions, our corporates to start inculcating a need to understand art at a very early age, irrespective of the outcome, this scenario will change perhaps in the next 2 decades. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here talking about the same challenges while someone else would be designing for us as a bot or as a mid-journey genius. Yeah, so we need to come back to the fundamental questions of how have we addressed these challenges. Yeah.
Rahul, Bruce, Aneesh, any last thoughts?
Sorry, can I go ahead? Yeah. So just a couple of stray thoughts. So one is, of course, that among our students, we have a host of young performers, young teachers. Unfortunately, when people take to teaching, it's because they have lost out as performers. So that should not be the case. That's the first thing. You really have to have a passion for teaching. That's first. But I wanted to say that there is a host of young musicians who are really, really talented, very diligent with their practice and learning. The lack of opportunity is there. Regarding the transparency that we were talking about and the kind of templates for contracts, etc., and what she was saying about the UNESCO. That government should step in. I mean, just once again, a reality check, All India Radio, I started performing in my teens, okay? I'm signing the same contract up until now. Same clauses. You know who is the person who can be the person who can drive me out of the radio station is the duty officer there, who has nothing to do with music. If he decides that this is not worth keeping on record, get out. If he thinks that I am drunk, get out. Yeah, that is the reality. Secondly, we have a fantastic Copyright Act. okay, which is really artist friendly. And thanks to Javed Akhtar, the recent amendment has been fantastic, for all the artists. But the implementation, who is going to implement that? I just gave you an example of Akashvani, and now Akashvani and Doordarshan, they aren't even having traditional music, new recordings. So this is the reality we are facing. So asking policy makers to speak for us is a little, tricky, So I really don't know what is the way out. And the third thing about interconnectedness, this is so wonderful. I think being relevant to the times that you are in, I think it's so important for students. And not relevant only so that you can get concert opportunities. It's to have an exposure to the rest of the arts. And we did that 4 or 5 centuries ago. In the 18th century and 19th century, we were doing that. There is documented proof about that, Literature, painting, music, dance coming together. Why can't we do it? It's only at such fora that we get to meet each other. Yeah. Otherwise, how many musicians go to an art exhibition? Or how many artists come? The converse does work, but rarely do you find musicians going to, experience the other arts. And that is so unfortunate.
Even the other music.
Other music too.
We were at Zubin Mehta's concert,
yes.
And I looked around, there wasn't one single other music.
Yes, yes, sadly. This is the...
Bruce, Rahul, quick. Asad, we have 2 minutes.
Okay, quickly then. One of them is that I don't think that education should be limited to young people either. Is that, that people don't stop learning and they don't stop growing. And oftentimes is that it can just be confined to people who are young. We invest in young people. I think we should invest in all people. Age is but a number. Creativity, through experience, life experience. People come to different things at different times. I don't know why we have a sell-by date on people. It's ridiculous. And the second thing is that the talk today and that in all the different arrays of arts that have been discussed today is that I'm looking forward to seeing everybody here at the NCPA to see whether it be the emerging artists, for Hindustani classical music, the concepts that are going on at the moment, or whether it be to, kind of like self, hopefully come and see some arts and crafts or crafts properly when we do some work on that, which we'll probably have a chat about as well. It's evolution, not revolution, is what I would say. I think that, I work in a building where there are people who really want to make this as great a world as possible for the people that come to it, but also for the artists as well. And that we will keep trying.
No, I just think that, the take home from this is, that we have to learn to value the arts. I think that's a very important point. And I think the way that we do that is by education. And I'd like to caveat that, and this could be a conversation for another panel, that I think we also need to learn to value that education. That I think is the problem in a nutshell. It seems to me that it's this sort of cycle where, we need to connect all the dots and value the education in the arts, which will then help us to value the arts.
Yeah, I guess the magic lies in the interconnectedness, because we've always chosen sides, and I go back to that theory which she shared so beautifully, a concept of andism. So there is art, there is education. There is art and education. We've always looked at, okay, I'm being educated, so I don't need to know about arts. Or I'm going to science, so I don't need to know of arts. I think there is an urgent need to acknowledge the interconnectedness of all these worlds, all the positions that we occupy. And that's why I have huge admiration for spaces like the Kiran Nadar, the Avid Learning. These are alternative schools, because schools forgot to teach how to bring diverse thoughts and point of views into a forum or into a classroom. That's why we need to break the walls down of the traditional classroom in our head and in a physical form, and create multiple classrooms in nature walks, in rock concerts, in restaurants where you understand art and plating and food and culture. I guess we need more forms of education and not just the traditional form of education, and then we will manage things better.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an enriching experience to moderate all of your diverse experience. I must confess I was a little frightened, but to end on the story of, a mentor was Dr. Rukmani Arundale, who set up Kalakshetra, and in girlhood, she always told us, this is before the gender dialogues had started, and she said, get more boys and men into art rooms. I'm sure from heaven somewhere she must be thinking that her student has done something right to get 5 men, unplugged, unvarnished truth, with compassion and absolute generous way of sharing your information. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to all our partners, FICCI, Dr. Jyotsna Suri for her generosity and continued support, Manish and Vikash, UNESCO, Junhee for always being so supportive and making it to Bombay especially. We've changed dates to have you here, but thank you so much. Teamwork Arts, Sanjoy for being our mentor and most of the times tormentor. Sanjay Sachdeva, Sadhana Rao, our Bangalore collaborator, where is she? Who's here in Bombay supporting us, and our esteemed speakers. It's really interesting to see that about almost 50% of our speakers are not from Bombay, and they've come on their own and stayed on their own to be part of this discussion. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to the awesome Avid team, Dhwani, Sagar, Aisha, Zahabia, Shantanu, Manohar, Vikram, Mahendra, Mrs. Ruya, thank you for your support. And to SR and the team here who've actually fed us through the day and hopefully will... Oh, thank you. I'm just going to stop these thank yous because, I think you'll want... I'm coming in between you or happy hour or tea and happy hour, so I don't think I'm in a very... But honestly, this conference has been great. We did do this conference in Bangalore. This conference is also going to be white papered, and both the conference summaries are going to be then presented to Mr. Roy to take it forward where he wants to, and hopefully it'll impact change. Thank you for being here, and just stalk us on social media if you want to know what we're doing next, or visit our website. Thank you once again. Good night.